Pedro, we sometimes lose track of Christmas just because we get caught up in the hustle and bustle of life. Have you ever had a Christmas or managed to have a Christmas away from that hustle and bustle that really brought home the meaning?
Yeah, I have, actually, without a doubt. I don't know if it's fair to say that it was away from the hustle and bustle, but it was a different kind of hustle and bustle. As you know, I grew up in Panama, and this was 22 years ago now, Christmas of 1989, I went home. I was in university. I went home for Christmas. In the country, it was quite different. I mean, we had heard in the news, maybe I should just put it all into context, because we lived under a military dictatorship all my life, 20 years. But in the last maybe 3 years, things had escalated and escalated. People might remember Manuel Noriega. He was the dictator at the time. So this is December, 15th or something. So that was kind of a bit of a shock for me. Now, we'd had American presence in Panama since 1903, since they built the canal.
Right.
The Americans, I think they still do, had military bases throughout the country. And so you'd see Americans. In fact, my dad worked for the Americans. You'd see Americans. But again, the military presence on the American side had also escalated. You'd hear about these maniobras, the maneuvers or exercises that they're having, planes flying overhead. And it's a little more than usual. So yeah, and then one day, Mr. Noriega goes on national television and proclaims himself as supreme leader of the country, as if he wasn't already.
Right.
And then says that we are in a state of war. And he didn't say we're in a state of war with the U.S., but that's what he was implying.
So at what point was this? You had arrived on the 15th.
Yeah, this was maybe around the 17th.
Okay.
17th, I remember, because we were at a club, at a bar. And even with the music blaring and people are dancing, that's something we do at home. On the TVs, instead of showing music videos, all of a sudden they had this man saying, and you could hear him, because they lowered the music and everybody was attentive, and he said, we're in a state of war. And I thought, can you do that? Can you just be in a state of war by yourselves? And so everything was escalating and escalating. There were situations between American soldiers and Panamanian soldiers, checkpoints increasing. Things were getting tense.
Okay.
But I don't know, you're 20 years old, I was visiting with friends and doing our thing until the night of December 19th, or December 20th, because it was already midnight.
What happened then?
Well, we were at the same club, actually, this place in Panama. And it was very funny, because at around just after midnight, the owner of the club shut the music down, and he went on the microphone and made an announcement and said, there are hay disturbios, there are disturbances, which was kind of code. So I think everybody should just quietly and quickly go home. Which is very unusual in a nightclub.
In a club, yeah.
And everybody, finish your drink and quickly and quietly go home. Now, I was with a bunch of friends, and we had kind of the code was to go to the home of whoever lived closest. Okay. So we all went to my friend Annabelle's home. And on the way there, we saw 2 or 3 military, like a convoy of U.S. soldiers just going down the street. And we were pretty sure that this was not a normal maneuver. Something was happening.
Right. What about Mass? What about going to Christmas Mass that year?
Okay, so Christmas Eve Mass, which traditionally is at midnight.
Right.
In our parish, they timed it around 10:30, 11, so that it would end around midnight. That year, at my parish, there was a Mass in our parish, which is two blocks from the house. But it was at 4 o'clock or 4:30. And by then I had been home without going out for a couple days, and I decided that I was going to go. But nobody else went. My mother decided she wasn't going to go out. Nobody wanted to go out. So I walked down the street, over the barricades and stuff. And there were, people went to church. People went to the Mass. But what was different was we had parishioners, some of the men, armed with guns or whatever weapons they had, standing outside of the church. And they had told the priest, we'll warn you if the paramilitary people are coming. Because again, we had heard, in Latin America, the church, it traditionally sides against the dictatorship. And in
Right.
this case, some churches, Noriega had marked some churches with a big T for traitor. And the rumor was, Panama's the land of rumors, that the rumor was that they were going to also break into churches and destroy and burn down churches. So we had people all throughout the Mass, and it was the shortest Christmas Mass. I think it was in 45 minutes we were done. But with these guys standing outside, ready to warn us. It was weird, and it's meaningful. I mean, to go back to your original question, it was meaningful because we didn't have the visiting and the presents, and some people didn't have food. So what are we celebrating? For a lot of people, they were celebrating liberation in the true sense, celebrating freedom in the true sense, which is in a way what Christmas is about. But really celebrating the birth of Christ, because that's what we celebrate. And it's not about presents or about food or about getting together with the family, because people didn't get together. You got together with whoever you were with. It wasn't even for my parents about their wedding anniversary. This is what the feast is really about. Christ, and what do we have to be thankful for? And I'll never forget my sister speaking to her, one of her priest friends, who said to her, because she was very, I think I was less upset. She was very upset and nervous. And this Jesuit priest said, you know, when Jesus was born, it probably wasn't unlike this. Israel was occupied by Rome. There were Roman soldiers everywhere. So, you know, maybe Jesus had angels flying around. We had helicopters flying around. But maybe not all that dissimilar than what we were going through. So I think it really kind of helped us focus on, well, what is this feast about? And what are we really celebrating? And do we really need all that other stuff?
That gives us a lot to think about,
Yeah,
Pedro.
I think about it every year, December 20th, every year.
Thank you so much for this other vision of Christmas. Feliz Navidad.
Yeah, Feliz Navidad.